Hello, everyone. Cindy Bettino, transformational healing, also host of Sterling Women, life coach, energy worker, happiness expert. And I'm here with Cort Maddox today, who is not only my business coach, but he is also the business coach sponsor for Sterling Women. And we've come together to make a bunch of videos to help business owners of all sizes, but mostly small business owners, right? And help them be more successful and more abundant in their businesses. And we are on what part?
Three.
We are on part 3. Thank you. Which is all about onboarding. So Cort is actually hired by businesses to find and hire employees. And so he knows what he speaks of, which is always wonderful. And Cort, you said when companies change these 4 things about hiring, that they hire more people that are great for them and their business. So let's talk about onboarding, because you said this is one of the 4 things that businesses need to change so that they can be more successful in hiring the right people and then keeping them.
Correct. So in the hiring process, typically we do the job ad, which we talked about. Then from those, we get candidates, we do phone screenings, then we do interviews. Right now, they're all virtual for the most part. And then we pick somebody that's going to work. As long as there is somebody from that pool, we're not going to fit a square peg into a round hole. So now we're bringing them on board. Now what? What's the next step? And what happens in a lot of companies is that we have this idea that they're going to be responsible for doing these 10, 20 different things. And so we say, okay, well, here, I've got a week and I need to train them, or I've got a day or 2 days or 3 days. And so we throw all this information out at them so that okay, here's everything you need to know. Blah, 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 blah. And we pepper them with all this information. And then they ask questions. And then 3 weeks in, we're like, oh my God, I don't know why they don't know this stuff already. Well, whenever you take a drink, you typically, you take it out of a cup or something. You don't take it out of a fire hose. And so if we really want to retain information, we want them to retain it, then what we need to do is to gather the main elements of their job, say that's 3 to 4 different elements, and then we start to make sure that they're secure in those 3 or 4, and that they're doing a measurement to get them from a 1 to 10 scale. We want to get them to a 7, a 6 or 7. Time is the only thing that gets people to an 8, 9, or 10. But as long as we can get them to a 6 or 7, we're golden. And
can
then
you
we
give
can
me an
move
example? I'm a little confused.
So let's say that we have it at the simplest purposes. Let's say that we have somebody that's going to be running a register, right? They're running a register. They're dealing with customer service. They're maybe answering the phone, those kind of things. Well, let's make sure that they are at a comfort level for those 3 main elements before we start to teach them how to do inventory and how to manage other employees or what have you. We want to make sure we take it out, we break it into different chunks of pieces of the job and train them on that, get them there, and then start in on the next element.
But, okay, so if I'm coming in and I'm going to handle a register at a brick and mortar, right, then it would be best if I am first trained on the register and first trained on company customer service and the right things to say when we greet people and the right things to say if we have someone that's a customer that's not happy, right? And stick with those basic things first to make sure they have those down and they have the right answers before we move on to anything else.
Correct. In a sense, yes. We take different elements of the job and we break it out. Okay. So when you're looking at whatever your job description is, let's say you've got 10 main elements that you're going to be having them be responsible for. Don't throw everything at them. Take a couple elements. Let's get them trained on that, then move on. Because we don't retain information that way. Typically, most people from a learning perspective they're kinesthetic learners. They need to be able to touch, feel, hear, interact with it. And so if we really want to give people the best experience from a training environment as possible, we want to train them according to their learning style. And being as most people are kinesthetic, we need them to kind of work their way through that process before going to the next thing. The very slim portion of the public is an auditory learner. And when you do that, you're driving your results to be an auditory learner, and they're not going to grasp it. So it's going to lead to a lot of different questions, a lot of unsurety, a lot of confusion on their end, because now they're going to be jumbling everything together versus, okay, I do these three things, I learn them, I get them. So when we start in a learning environment, doesn't matter what you're learning, you could be learning an instrument, learning to ride a bike, whatever the case may be, you start and you have to be conscious and you're very uncomfortable. Eventually you get to the point where you can get more comfortable, but you still have to think about it. You still have to be conscious. Then eventually, when you've been doing it long enough, and this is where you get to your 8s, 9s, and 10s, you could do it in your sleep. You're unconscious when you're doing it. You're very, very comfortable. You're good to go. The same thing when you first buy a new house and you have driven to work back and forth to this other house. Now you have to start driving back and forth to work from a new house. You have to think about it. Otherwise, you end up at your old house, right? So it's the same thing when you're learning a new task, is that it takes time. And
okay. Yeah. So it takes time. So what I'm gathering from what you're saying, just I'm going to try to sum it all together, right? Is that when we bring people on board, when we bring them onto our companies, we have to take the whole thing and break it down into bite-sized pieces. We have to train people in the different ways of learning, which is kinesthetic, visual, and auditory, so that we can teach all people, right? If we only teach one way, we're not going to be able to teach all people. So it's super important that we understand how people learn, and people also learn through repetition, which is what you're talking about. So over time, as we repeat, we don't have to think about it anymore. Like, we don't think about how we walk. We don't think about how we talk. We just do it, right? So onboarding, if you're onboarding people and you're trying to throw everything at them at once, you're not going to be as successful. If you only teach one way, like visually, read this and then regurgitate on a test, then people aren't going to be as successful. So you need all three types of learning: visual, kinesthetic, auditory. And then, oh, damn, what was the last thing? And then we have to make sure that we repeat, because people learn through repetition.
Yes. And guess what? The benefit of this is that it's not illegal to ask people how they best take information and how they best take in feedback. And those are great questions to ask, so that you're working with the individualized person.
Say it again, because I love that.
So you ask them how they prefer feedback and how they learn, and therefore you know how to communicate back and forth with them.
I love that. Let's end with that, because that's brilliant. And I don't know how many people do that. And I think it's super important, because I'm kinesthetic, auditory, visual last. So when people say, hey, read this article and give me feedback, or read this book and then take this test, I don't do my best. So I love that. Thank you, Cort. Onboarding, super important things to know and to do, so that you can hire well, don't have to fire as much, and train and have the best employees that you can have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.